Hello students, welcome back to the lecture series on General Studies paper 3. We have been analyzing General Studies question paper of UPSC 2023, right? So till yesterday we have discussed up to question number 16. So in this session we will discuss all the remaining questions in General Studies paper 3. The question number 17 is it is particularly about wetlands. Now, because of increasing climate change and the ecological emergencies, the importance for wetlands have been increasing over a period of time. Because wetlands used to play a very important and a very crucial role in biodiversity conservation, and also it also has a huge ecological and recreational advantages. So in this particular context, the question has been asked that comment on the national conservation programs that was initiated by the government of India. So we need to talk about the national wetland conservation program that was launched by the government of India in the first part of the question. And secondly, we need to write few of India's wetlands. Okay, few of India's wetlands of national importance. Now, if you know that there is a Ramsar Convention, the Ramsar Convention was signed by most several countries, which aimed at protecting, conserving the wetland ecosystem. Now, India is also part of the Ramsar Convention, so therefore India is also obligated to conserve and to protect wetlands. So therefore, as part of India's obligation to protect wetlands, India has launched National Wetland Conservation Program. So this is the question is. Now in this question, you can first introduce what is National Wetland Conservation Program. Okay, so the National Wetland Conservation Program is part of the central government's centrally sponsored scheme. If you know, there are different varieties of central government programs, central sector schemes and centrally sponsored schemes, and this is part of the centrally sponsored scheme. Now in the centrally sponsored scheme, both center plus states take active participation in the implementation of a particular program. Now it is a part of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It is implemented by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, and this National Wetland Conservation Program was launched in the year 1986 by the Government of India. And the main objective of the National Wetland Conservation Program is preventing the nation's wetlands from further deterioration. So it will prevent wetlands the further deterioration and protect, conserve India's wetlands. Now the first part of the question is asked to comment on the National Wetland Conservation Program that was initiated by the Government of India. So please understand, earlier the Government of India launched National Wetland Conservation Program. So along with the National Wetland Conservation Program, there's also a program called National Lakes Conservation Program. National Lakes Conservation Program. So this National Lakes Conservation Program has been, launched by the government in the year 2001. In the year 2001. So in 2013, the Government of India has integrated both National Wetland Conservation Program, National Wetland Conservation Program, and also National Lake Conservation Program. So this integration will give a better better insights into the wetland conservation, and will also result in convergence of funds and convergence of various mechanisms which are already established for the conservation of wetlands and lakes. So ever since the integration of the both the programs in 2013, so it is the National Wetland Conservation Program is implemented as a single program. So there are number of objectives for the National Wetland Conservation Program. We should also write those objectives. Now understand the general objectives of the wetland conservation, right? So the basic objective is conservation and restoration of wetlands. So if we have a few wetlands, for example, Chilka Lake in Odisha is considered as a wetland. So that wetland need to be conserved from existing threats, whatever threats. For example, encroachment is a threat, encroachment, and also increasing aquaculture will also be a threat, and unregulated fishing will also be considered as a threat. So therefore, it has to be conserved from those threats. And also, there are few wetlands which are at the brink of extinction. So they have to be restored. So those wetlands have to be restored. This is the basic objective of National Wetland Conservation Program. Now, apart from these two main objectives, there are also other sub objectives. They include improving the water quality, because the urban waste and agriculture runoff being entering into these wetlands, that has resulted in contamination of wetlands. So when wetlands are being contaminated, it very often result in eutrophication, a phenomena called eutrophication. So with the eutrophication, the marine organisms or the aquatic organisms in the wetlands, they often die. So that further deteriorate the conditions of wetlands. So therefore, improving the overall water quality of wetlands is also one of the objective of this above mentioned program. And if we are able to implement all these measures, then it would significantly improve the biodiversity and the ecosystem of the existing wetlands. Biodiversity and ecosystem of the existing wetlands. And the other objective of the National Wetland Conservation Program is we need to mainstream the development of wetlands. For example, a particular program has been brought for the conservation and protection of wetlands. That program has to be mainstreamed. More and more fund allocation should be given to the wetland conservation, and also the community engagement. So, and it should also be considered as a top priority. It should also be considered as a top priority rather than secondary priority. So therefore, a mainstreaming of wetland development programs with the help of the respective state governments would result in integrated management of those wetlands, and it will also give impetus to research and development of wetlands. Now, there is a four-pronged approach as part of the National Wetland Conservation Program. The four-pronged approach. So the four-pronged approach include firstly a brief documentation of the existing wetlands. This a brief document of the wetlands consists of the baseline data related to wetlands, and also the basic site characteristics will also be understood properly, analyzed, and documented. So over a period of time, what happens is that we have a adequate amount of data, and that could play a very crucial role in biodiversity conservation and also protection. And it will also help us understand the existing threats or the potential threats the wetlands have been facing. So the second pillar of the four-pronged strategy is wetland mitras. So we have understood the importance of community participation. Community participation is very important for the successful implementation of any program at the grassroots level. Even for the national mission to clean Ganga, there were Ganga Mitras. So they actively take part in improving the awareness among the people about the cleanliness of River Ganga. So therefore, the wetland Mitras were also created for the purpose of generating citizen networking and also enabling the participation of local populations in the protection and conservation of wetlands. So it involves all the stakeholders in the conservation of wetlands. The third pillar is wetland health card. So wetland health card will also be issued. So therefore, a monitoring mechanism, so that would regularly assess the health of the wetlands. So when we are able to assess the health of the wetland, properly, and that would help us take measures, adequate measures to prevent such such practices which have been deteriorating the health of these wetlands. And the fourth pillar include integrated management plan. Now, integrated management plan includes the convergence of existing government schemes for the conservation and protection of wetlands, and it will also, include the convergence of funds, and also existing government programs and institutional mechanisms. They are particularly aimed at management and conservation of these wetlands. So these four are the existing, part of the four-pronged strategy as part of the National Wetland Conservation Program. Now, the success of the National Conservation Program is the next logical part of the question. Now, the success include there's a track record. For example, the ministry has undertaken various wetland rejuvenation program. Okay, so it is also part of the 169 transformative ideas. Now it has resulted in restoration and rejuvenation of existing wetlands, and around 100 major wetlands are included or restored or rejuvenated as part of the National Wetland Conservation Program. This existing program has also resulted in biodiversity preservation. How it results in biodiversity preservation? Because when a wetland is at its maximum health, that would results in highest biodiversity. It a uh, number of species at the existing at the existing wetlands would be supported by these wetland ecosystem. So therefore, many wetlands under the National Wetland Conservation Program protection are home to rare and migratory bird species. Along with that, aquatic life and unique plant also are present at these wetland sites. And National Wetland Conservation Program has also resulted in significant awareness generation among the local communities, and it will also help in dissemination of knowledge and education about the importance of these wetlands and the need for the conservation. So over a period of time, this results in a greater community engagement and community participation. See, when awareness is being generated among the local communities, that would result in understanding the importance of wetland conservation, and that is the essence of National Wetland Conservation Program. And after that, the sustainable livelihoods. Please understand, wetlands not just support the biodiversity of a particular area, but they are also a very rich source of ecotourism and fishing activities. So if you remember, fishing support the livelihoods of the local fishermen, and ecotourism will also generate significant amount of livelihoods for the people in those areas where wetlands are located. Apart from that, these wetlands will also support the agriculture activities by providing a constant source of irrigation. So therefore, considering all those benefits, wetlands are considered as a sustainable source of livelihoods for the local communities. And the other success of National Wetland Conservation Program is undertaking scientific research in those wetlands. Okay, so regular research and monitoring of those wetlands will help us better understanding of these complex habitats. No doubt that wetlands are complex habitats, so therefore the multi-pronged approach is required for the better conservation and management of these wetlands. And scientific research will rightly help us understand the complex habitats called wetlands. And there are certain limitations also of National Wetland Conservation Program. So those limitations include the National Wetland Conservation Program has a very limited coverage. Limited coverage means not all the wetlands which are important and significant are not covered under the National Wetland Conservation Program. And second important limitation is there is an interagency coordination is lacking. See, interagency coordination, interdepartmental coordination is very important, because if there is no coordination between different agencies envisioned for the conservation and protection of wetlands, that would result in confusion. That would result in confusion, and even the existing measures for the protection of those wetlands will not yield sustainable results. So therefore, effective wetland conservation often requires interagency coordination. So therefore, there is a need for a multiple government agencies. For example, the National Wetland Conservation Program has been launched by the center, and we cannot expect only center to take care of wetlands, but there is a need for state governments to play a very crucial role in wetland conservation. Apart from states, the local governments should also play a very important and a very crucial role in wetland conservation, so that the objective of the National Wetland Conservation Program can be achieved. And the third major limitation of this National Wetland Conservation Program is it is unable to address, it was not able to address the threat of the wetland ecosystems. The invasive alien species poses certain threat for any particular area. If there is an invasive alien species that threaten the biodiversity of that particular region. So therefore, the National Wetland Conservation Program has not substantially addressed the threat of invasive species, because controlling these invasive species often require a complex interventions, and those interventions are very often resource intensive. Resource intensive means it requires extensive financial support in order to counter the invasive species, and this also requires the interagency coordination as well, because controlling the invasive species is also very complex. We have to understand the source of those invasive alien species, and then we can understand the root cause of these invasive species. The next major problem is climate change. Rapid climate change has also been posing a significant threat to the wetlands. For example, due to a phenomenon like El Nino, what happens is subcontinent has been facing deficit rainfall. Due to the deficit rainfall, there is no constant source of replenishing these wetlands. So therefore, over a period of time, these wetlands have been turning into barren lands, and that led to the overall degradation of wetlands, and they no longer support the existing biodiversity and also ecosystem services. And it is rightly said that climate change also posing a greater threat for the wetland conservation, and National Wetland Conservation Program has not significantly addressed the threats posed by the climate change as well. So the next basic limitation is data deficiency. So when we lack data, significant amount of data on wetlands, that results in absence of evidence-based data-driven policy. It is also very important to have significant amount of data, so that the interventions are very often data driven. Interventions are very often data driven. So data driven interventions are very specific, they are not generic in nature. So very specific interventions would result in resource conserving and effective utilization of existing resources for the best possible measures or adequate measures for the conservation of these wetlands. And The question has also asked us to write India's wetlands of international importance. We need to write some of the wetlands of international importance. So they are included in the Ramsar sites. So there are many many wetlands in India. So they are many wetlands in India, and they are part of Ramsar list. So Ramsar list, they have been facing significant threat. They have been facing significant threat. So therefore, it is the responsibility of the government to come up with adequate measures to save these wetlands. Some of the wetlands which are part of the Ramsar list include Bunny grasslands in Gujarat. These Bunny grasslands are known as India's largest grassland ecosystems, and they are located in Gujarat. So why they are particularly important is because they support migratory birds, and they also provide a very critical habitat for the endangered Indian wild ass species. Now, Indian wild ass species is look we can find this Indian wild ass in Gujarat Bunny grasslands, and the Bunny grasslands provide critical habitat for Indian wildlife and also support migratory birds. And the second Ramsar site is Majuli Island. Majuli Island is the largest riverine island in the world. So it is formed in the middle of Brahmaputra River. Okay, in the Assam, in the state of Assam. So in this context, it is very vital for biodiversity conservation, and it also has a huge cultural significance. Now the next Ramsar site is Gandhi Sagar. The Gandhi Sagar wetland is located in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So it is located in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So this Gandhi Sagar wetland is not just important for water management, but it is also important because it has a huge ecological significance. So ecological significance means biodiversity conservation, supporting the ecosystem services, providing critical habitat for existing endangered species and also migratory species. So therefore, it will do all the ecological service. It will provide all the ecological services, and it will also provide water management. It is important for water management because it provides water for irrigation, drinking water. So therefore, it has a twin benefits. The next Ramsar site that is important is Pulicat Lake. Now, the Pulicat Lake is in the border of both Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. It is located in the border of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. So, Pulicat Lake is very often considered as a haven for waterfowl. So, waterfowl is a bird, and it is a migratory bird, and that migrate from Central Asia for particularly for the breeding purposes. So therefore, it is one of the key Ramsar site in India, the Pulicat Lake. Right. So in conclusion, you can write the importance of wetland conservation. You can write the importance of wetland conservation, or you can give a brief suggestions. How can we conserve these wetlands? Give suggestions conservation of these wetlands. So the suggestions include involvement of communities, local community participation, and also coastal regulation zones implementation. And apart from that, there should be a multi-pronged approach involving national, state, and local governments. And apart from that, there should be adequate data, and that can be acquired through research and development of existing wetlands. And this will help us understand the threats the wetlands have been facing, so that we can come up with adequate interventions to conserve and protect these wetlands. So this is how you can conclude this answer. So the next question is, all about the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a non-governmental organization. Okay, so this is a non-governmental organization, and the major objective of IPCC is to come up with a adequate data on climate change, global warming, climate change, and global warming. So therefore, these inputs will help countries to come up with new innovative programs. For example, net zero, intended nationally determined contributions, and countries like European Union have come up with carbon taxation, carbon tax, and even India has taken several initiatives for promoting renewable energies. So overall, IPCC will help these countries by providing adequate amount of data to come up with new interventions to prevent climate change, global climate change. So recent IPCC report has been predicted that the global sea level rise, uh, uh, you know, uh, the global sea levels will increase or rise by at least 1 meter by the year 2180. 2180, at least 1 meter, global sea levels will rise. So even a rise in a few centimeters will have a huge consequences on the coastal communities. So in this context, a rise in 1 meter sea level would have a more severe and worst consequences. So in this context, the question has been asking us to, write the impact of this sea level rise on India. Okay, so this is the one part of the question, and also other countries which are part of the Indian Ocean region. Now if you look at the Indian Ocean region, so majority of the countries which are part of the Indian Ocean are either poor or underdeveloped countries. So they also have a significant amount of population. So in this context, sea level rise would have a worst consequences, not just for India but also for other countries in the Indian Ocean region. So in this context, it is important for us to understand these consequences. Firstly, we can write the same data which has been given by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change about the sea level rise. So you can also give some data which has been showing the quantum of increasing sea levels by any other organization. So it is not just about the sea levels. So you can also give some data on increasing temperatures or rising temperatures, and how rising temperatures can contribute to rising sea levels rising sea levels, right? Now after giving such a brief introduction, you have to talk about the basis of sea level rise. And what is the basis of sea level rise prediction? So one such basis was thermal expansion. So this is also a reason for the sea level rise. So thermal expansion, generally when because of increased use of fossil fuels has resulted in global temperatures, increasing global temperatures, and global temperatures has resulted in a greenhouse gas effect. So in this greenhouse gas effect, the excessive heat will not be will be trapped within the Earth's atmosphere. So therefore, this excessive heat will be absorbed by the ocean waters, and when they absorb heat, automatically the ocean water expands. When they absorb heat and temperature, the ocean water expands. Now expanding ocean water would also result in rising the sea levels. So this one way contributing to rising sea levels. So therefore, the thermal expansion of the sea water is one of the significant contributor of the rising sea levels. So I hope you understood this linkage. So because of increasing usage of fossil fuels, that has been resulting in global warming. Global warming, and global warming is characterized by increased temperatures in the atmosphere. Increased temperatures in the atmosphere. So increased temperatures will be absorbed by the ocean waters, and when they absorb heat, they will start expanding. So expanding sea water would result in rising sea levels. That is rightly said by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So the next aspect is melting polar ice caps. See, because of global warming, the temperatures of planet Earth have been increasing every day. So increasing almost every year, not every day, but every year, the temperatures of planet Earth have been increasing. So the global ice caps and glaciers hold a largest amounts of fresh water on the planet Earth. So because of increasing temperatures of planet Earth would result in melting of these glaciers and ice caps. So melting of these glaciers over a period of time will increase or will result in rising sea levels, because ultimately the melted water of these glaciers will submerge with the oceans. The next aspect is glacial retreat. In glacial retreat, what happens is glaciers in those mountainous regions, including the Himalayas, so they are gradually retreating because of higher temperatures around the planet Earth. Higher temperatures around the planet Earth. So this glacial water or melting water flows into the ocean over a period of time, and it will also contribute to rising sea levels. And the other reason for increasing sea levels is Greenland ice sheet changes have also been taking place at a rapid pace. Because of increasing global temperatures, that has resulted in melting of even Greenland ice sheets. Greenland ice sheets melted water will flow into the ocean. So that will also contributing to rising levels of sea. So even Arctic ice has also been melting at a rapid pace due to global warming. Now, in this context, if you look at the impact of melting glaciers on India, firstly, we need to talk about the impact on the population. So, what sort of impact it will have on the population? So, one major impact is it would lead to displacement of millions of coastal population who are residing in our coastal areas. For example, there are several coastal areas, Chennai, Mumbai, and even Kolkata also. So they are all like a coastal areas. So that would result in displacement of a huge number of population because of rising sea levels. So there was an estimate. According to this estimate, India had around 6 crore of population who are living in the low elevation coastal zones. This estimate is 2000 figures. Okay, so as per the 2000 figures. However, this is projected to rise by 21 crore by 2016. So by 2016, around 21 crore of India's population will live in the coastal areas. So you can imagine the quantum of displacement from the because of rising sea levels. Saline ingress is also another major problem. So increasing sea surface temperature will result in intrusion of salt water into the freshwater sources, so thereby contaminating existing freshwater sources, and that will affect drinking water availability and agriculture in India. Now, coastal erosion. So major coastal cities like Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, so they could face a significant infrastructure damages and disruptions. Why? Because they are located in the coastal regions. So since they are located in the coastal regions, rising sea levels could contribute to significant infrastructure damage and also disruptions. There are also several key ports and industrial zones which are located in these risk zones. For example, If we talk about industrial zones, Kolkata, Chennai industrial corridor is also goes across the eastern coastline, and there are also several key ports. Chennai is a deep water port, and they would also face a significant threat. And the next major impact would be island territories. If you recall, India had Lakshadweeps and also Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Now, rising sea surface temperatures would submerge those coastal island chains. Would submerge those coastal island chains. So, therefore, it would result in displacement of people or migration of people into the mainland India, and therefore this would result in further strain on existing limited resources. And you can also write another major impact on of rising sea levels is on mangroves. So mangroves are very often helped the human populations or human habitations as shelter belts from tsunamis and cyclones. So therefore, it would also have a significant impact on the biodiversity uh, because of rising sea levels, right? So the mangroves and coral reefs. So we can find these coral reefs in Gulf of Mannar, Gulf of Park Strait, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and Lakshadweeps. So therefore, rise in sea surface temperatures or rise in sea levels would result in damaging mangroves and coral reefs in India. And these mangroves and coral reefs are considered very critical and crucial for biodiversity conservation, and they actually serve as natural buffers against storm surges. And so we need to understand the impact of rising sea levels on countries in the Indian Ocean region. First and foremost, there are several small island nations within the Indian Ocean region. So there are Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius. So they are all small island nations. So over a period of time, these islands will also submerge under ocean water, and that would result in increased migration of people to other countries. Secondly, low elevation countries. There are several low elevation countries like Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia. Now, the majority of the land or the territory of these countries lying under sea, okay, lying in the coastal areas or low lying coastal areas, and because of this, they have a highest risk of more frequent flooding, and it impacts agriculture, infrastructure, and human settlements because it results in saltwater ingress. Saltwater ingress. Now, saltwater ingress will result in contamination of existing freshwater resources, and will also result in soil salinity. Soil will not be useful for the practice of agriculture. And if you look at the impact of coral reefs, so there are several island chains in the Indian Ocean. There is a rich coral reef buildup. So, because of increasing heat, acidity, and uh, consequent sea level rise, the coral bleaching will also take place. Now, coral bleaching will result in damage to the biodiversity. Will also affect the existing tourism, ecotourism, and livelihoods of the people. And the impact, if you look at the impact of the same in East African coast, there are several nations along the East African coast, including Kenya, Tanzania, and Somalia. So those countries in the Eastern African coast will experience the coastal erosion, flooding, and damage to critical infrastructure. Now, these countries are already poor and underdeveloped countries, and climate change and consequent sea level rise will further deteriorate the living conditions of the people who are living in the of eastern coastal region of Africa. And all these factors over a period of time will contribute to climate refugees, the problem of climate refugees. Climate refugees will also create a problems of national security. for countries, especially in the Indian Ocean region. So therefore, you can conclude this answer by emphasizing on the need to meet the existing targets of countries. For example, the developed countries need to extend support, both technical, technological, and financial support to these poor and underdeveloped countries. So these developed countries have not yet given the $100 billion climate finance under the Green Climate Fund. So therefore, they have to immediately disperse the $100 billion climate funding to poor and underdeveloped countries. And they should also support these countries by providing technological and financial support. Now, apart from this, there are several countries who announced the net zero emission targets, the net zero emission targets by 2050. So, therefore, they have to push and revise their net zero emission targets to earlier than 2050, so that this will help in curbing global temperatures and also melting of glaciers. So melting of glaciers will also reduce overall rise in sea levels. So the next important question is the internal security. This is with respect to internal security. Now, internal security is one of the major challenge for India. Whether it is Kashmir militancy, Northeast insurgency, and left-wing extremism, and also money laundering, drug trafficking, human trafficking, illegal immigration. So all these factors have been posing significant internal security challenges for India. So therefore, this question has been asking us to identify major internal security challenges first and foremost, and in the second part of the question we need to write the role of central intelligence and investigative agencies. So what are the central intelligence and investigative agencies? They are tasked with the countering these internal security threats. Now, in the introduction itself, you can write any data which shows the problem of internal security which India has been facing, right? So this is the first, in the introduction, you can write that India has been facing the constant threat from the internal as well as external security. For example, externally, we have been facing the problem of cross-border terrorism, even the drug trafficking. These are major problems externally India has been facing. However, internally also there are several such problems India has been facing. So there was an index at the global level that ranks countries based on internal security. So the index is World Internal Security and Police Index. This particular index has ranked India 104 out of 127 countries. So you can imagine the proximity. You can imagine the challenges India has been facing, the internal security challenges and threats India has been facing just by looking at the ranking. So this is one of the worst ranking for India because it has been facing several internal security challenges. The first part of the question, you need to write the internal security challenges so India has been facing. Firstly, we should talk about the traditional threats. Traditional threats are not new to India, so they are, continuing from several decades. So one of the most challenging traditional threat is left-wing extremism. So within India, there are several red corridors. So these red corridors are very well known for the left-wing extremism. Okay, so they are known for the left-wing extremism. So these red corridors are very much prevalent in parts of Bihar, Jharkhand, and Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Maharashtra, parts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So this is considered as a red corridor, and the left-wing extremism and Naxalism is very much prevalent in these red corridors. And insurgency in Northeast is also a very major problem. Okay, so insurgency, they are demanding either more autonomy or they are demanding separation of their respective regions from India based on ethnicity, and external support in terms of finances and also moral support, support in terms of arms and ammunition uh, will further aggravating the situation in the northeastern region. For example, people these armed insurgency groups in northeast have been demanding Greater Nagaland, Bodoland separate state, and militancy in Jammu and Kashmir, and also radicalization of youth in Jammu and Kashmir, along with cross-border terrorism supported by Pakistan, has also been a major traditional internal security threat for India. After that, the organized crime include drug trafficking, arms smuggling, and also human trafficking are some of the major problems. So if you look at the drug trafficking and arms smuggling, so India is located between two major drug producing regions. So one is Golden Crescent and the other is Golden Triangle. So these are largest drug production regions in the world, and India is very often becoming a zone of transshipments of these drugs and also the largest consumer of these drugs. So drug trafficking has also become a major problem, and across the India-Bangladesh border, human trafficking, cattle smuggling, counterfeiting, so are some of the major problems in the India-Bangladesh border. Even in the Indo-Pakistan border, apart from cross-border terrorism, drug trafficking, drug smuggling, and also trafficking of arms and ammunition has becoming a major challenge for India. Now, after that, the illegal immigration and refugee crisis. Refugees, for example, the Bru refugee crisis in Tripura, and infiltration of illegal immigrants from Bangladesh into India is also another major problem. So, after that, a recent Rohingya crisis in Myanmar. So, that has also led to the illegal immigration of Rohingyas into India. So, therefore, the communal violence and the religious fundamentalism have also been resulted in increased internal security challenges for India. So these are some of the traditional internal security challenges India has been facing. And there are also some non-traditional security threats. So non-traditional security threats include money laundering. So generally, money laundering involves those transactions which are not counted as legal transactions. The black money will be converted into a white and legal currency through the money laundering and hawala transactions. So very often, shell companies and casinos are being used for money laundering practices. Secondly, the maritime security is also one of the major challenge, because a maritime domain has very often used for drug trafficking and piracy, smuggling, and human trafficking. So therefore, maritime security is also one of the key concern and non-traditional security threat for India. And cyber security has been emerging as one of the most potential and potent threat. In fact, the Global Information Safety Report has concluded that India has one of the highest cyber attacks in recent past. So, if we look at the example, the ransomware attack on servers on AIMS Delhi, the servers of AIMS Delhi is one such example of cyber attacks. And neo-terrorism. Uh, when we talk about neo-terrorism, the lone wolf attacks. So lone wolf attacks generally the people who are living in those respective countries, but they do not have any active, linkages with the existing terrorist groups, existing terrorist organizations, and it is also very difficult for the law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies to find out people who are planning to conduct lone wolf attacks. For example, Easter bombings in Sri Lanka is considered as a lone wolf attack. So such lone wolf attacks are very often comes under the neo-terrorism. Okay. Now you also hear about sleeper cells. Sleeper cells. Now sleeper cells are also part of neo-terrorism, and because of this, anonymity and lack of active linkages with other terrorist organizations, it is very often difficult to find out these sleeper cells and people who are planning to conduct the lone wolf attacks. And the next part of the answer is address these challenges. Various intelligence and investigative agencies, so they have been playing a very significant, very important role. So one such agency that has been created to tackle with those internal security and internal and external security threats is National Investigation Agency. So this NIA has very often performs the counter-terrorism operations. Okay, so it performs the counter-terrorism operations, and it is also very often work as a platform for in-depth investigation of various offenses. So NIA Special Court has also been established for speedy trials. If you look at the example, there was a raid conducted by NIA in the state of Tamil Nadu. So that was particularly to foil the ISIS inspired recruitment drive. And secondly, Enforcement Directorate has also been established in order to prevent money laundering, cases of money laundering or terror financing activities. So this Enforcement Directorate has been, it has been accorded powers under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002, and also prevention, so the Foreign Exchange Management Act 1999. Now, if you write the exam, you can write the example of, uh, you know, recent action on Popular Front by the, for its money laundering activities. Okay, so the other agencies which are part of it include for this. So the research and analysis wing. So it is very often conduct the covert operations and intelligence gathering, intelligence sharing, and it will also undertake the counter-terrorism efforts. So therefore, preventing major terrorist attacks on India. And the next agency is Central Intelligence. So sorry, Intelligence Bureau. Okay. So the Intelligence Bureau, it serves as India's internal security agency, and this intelligence bureau is responsible for mitigating the domestic threats. So, if we are facing any threats from militancy, left-wing extremism, and also northeast insurgency, it would gather inputs and information. So, therefore, the intelligence collection, and it also act as a security advisor to the state. And third, Director General Income Tax Investigation. It very often deal with the cases of money laundering and tax evasion. The next agency is Narcotic Control Bureau. Narcotic Control Bureau undertake important functions to prevent illicit trafficking and drug abuse. The government of India has targeted to achieve the aim of or the goal of Nasha Mukti Bharat or drug free India by the year 2050. Central Bureau of Investigation, it is very often deal with economic crimes and other conventional crimes. So these are all the agencies which are deal with both traditional and non-traditional internal security challenges. So while writing conclusion, so you can just write about, so to tackle these multi-dimensional nature of threats and security challenges, so we need to have a more coordination between the intelligence investigation agencies. So when we have such a a close coordination and cooperation between these different agencies, we can use the we can effectively utilize the multi-agency the multi-agency inputs, and that will overall help in tackling these internal security challenges more effectively. The 20th question is, give out the major sources of terror funding in India. Okay, what are the major sources of terror funding in India and efforts being undertaken to curtail these sources? So, what are the efforts undertaken by the government of India to counter these major sources of terror? And in the light of this, discuss the main aim of the objective of no money for terror. Okay, this is the first part. Sorry, this is the second part. And secondly, um, sorry. So, firstly, you need to write a brief introduction about the terror funding. So, what exactly is the terror funding and how the terror funding has been resulting in increasing terror activities in different countries, not just developing countries, but also in the developing world. Okay. Now, first part of the question, you need to write the major sources of terror funding in India. So, this is the first part of the question. In the second part of the question, you need to write the efforts that are being made to curtail these sources. What are the efforts undertaken by the government? And in the third part of the question, so in the light of this, discuss the aim and objective of No Money for Terror conference that was recently held in Delhi. So, firstly, when we look at the major sources of terror funding in India, so foreign funding is one of the most important and the crucial sources of terror funding for the terrorist organization. So, very often, foreign terrorist organizations and sponsors, they provide funding to the terrorist organizations and terrorist groups which are operating in India. And the foreign funding very often come from both state actors plus non-state actors. For example, countries like countries like Pakistan, they can directly provide funding for terrorist activities in India. And non-state actors include certain terrorist organizations. They directly or indirectly providing funding and arms and ammunition for terrorist organizations in other countries. And second major source of terror funding is Hawala transactions. So Hawala transactions are part of the money laundering. So they very often convert the money which is often considered as a black money, which is often considered as a black money. And this black money is very often rerouted as a legal money. Legal money. So therefore, the Hawala transactions, the money which has been earned through corrupt means, extortion, money laundering, will also be rerouted through Hawala transactions for terror funding. The third major problem is smuggling and trade based on money laundering. So there are certain terror organizations, so they often involve in illegal trade activities. So if we can mention the example of ISIS. So when it was at its peak in Iraq and Syria, so it used to sell the crude oil. So therefore, it also involved in illegal sale or illegal trade activities, and it also involved in smuggling of goods and narcotics. Terror organizations in Africa also, they very often involve in illegal smuggling of goods and narcotics. Even several terror outfits, terror organizations, they often use drug trafficking for funding activities. Okay. Now, after that, extortion and kidnapping is also another major source of terror financing. Extortion and ransom payments from businesses or individuals or governments, they can very often source as a very key source, a very important source of income for these terrorist organizations. Now, after that, the counterfeiting currency. Indian currency is counterfeited in countries like Bangladesh and even in Pakistan. So the counterfeit currency very often becomes a crucial source of terror funding, which is coming to India. Now, in earlier question also, we have discussed certain agencies which have been dealing with the internal security challenges. So, in this question also, we need to talk about those institutional measures which have been established to tackle the terror funding. So the enforcement directorate. So we have discussed that enforcement directorate receives or you know uh, the source of powers of enforcement directorates from the FEMA Act 1999 and also Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. Enforcement Directorate are usually responsible for enforcing laws. They are related to foreign exchange, money laundering, and also economic offenses. So it also investigate cases related to money laundering and also illegal transfer of funds. The second agency which has been created for tackling terror financing is Intelligence Bureau. So Intelligence Bureau gathers intelligence and it is very often involves in intelligence sharing with the other agencies and countries. So therefore, it will also prevent any such terror funding or terror activities across the country. Third, Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank of India, we all know that this is a central bank of India and it very often plays a very important regulatory role. Okay, so Reserve Bank of India has crucial role in anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing regulations. And the fourth point would be the fourth institution is international cooperation also. So international, when we talk about the international cooperation, there's an agency called Financial Action Task Force. Now this Financial Action Task Force, based on the credentials of the countries, would place those countries who have been directly providing monetary support to these terrorist organizations or has not been taking any such measures to prevent terror funding or terrorist activities in their respective countries would place these countries in grey list and blacklist. So therefore India is also been very actively engaging with the international organizations like Financial Action Task Force to curb terror funding. And India has also taken several legislative reforms. So these legislative reforms are also aimed to prevent the terror activities. For example, the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and also Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. So they also aimed at curbing the illegal financing or terror financing. Now, what is the aim and objective of the No Money for Terror uh, terror conference that was recently conducted by Government of India? So this is the next part of the question. So the No Money for Terror conference was started in the year 2008. Okay. So initially this was started by the government of France, and the specific focus of the No Money for Terror conference is cooperation between countries to curb terror financing. So they cooperate with each other to prevent terror funding. Now, if you look at the aim and objective of terror funding, the major theme of No Money for Terror campaign is global trends in terror financing and terrorism. And secondly, the major objective of No Money for Terror campaign includes understanding the mode, medium, and method of terror financing. So, what exactly the medium and the mode and method of terror financing, so that the measures could be taken to prevent terror financing with the international cooperation or cooperation among the countries which are part of the No Money for Terror conference. And this particular conference has also adopted a principle, and the principle is called as one mind, one approach. And this one mind, one approach principle is aimed at cracking down on terror financing. Okay, so all the countries will adopt one particular approach, and that approach will help in curbing terror funding, terror financing. And No Money for Terror conference or terror group will also upgrade their existing technologies. And when they upgrade their technologies, it will result in concerted efforts to prevent terror financing. and they will also move towards emerging technologies like cryptocurrencies, metaverse, and other virtual assets. So they will understand how these cryptocurrencies uh, have become an alternative mode of terror funding in these for the terrorist organizations, so that the efforts could be taken to prevent even the cryptocurrency funding to terror organizations. Okay, so these countries which are part of No Money for Terror, they also stress on dismantling the terrorist safe havens. There are few countries in the world they have been providing terrorist safe havens. So Pakistan is one such example which has been providing terrorist safe havens. So it has not been taking any substantial measures to curb the terror activities, terror funding. So because of this reason, Pakistan was in the grey list of Financial Action Task Force. So previously, of course, now it was out of the Financial Action Task Force grey list. So therefore, the countries which are part of the No Money for Terror, so they will have a robust linkages. So to understand, how the organized crime networks have been working and how the narco terror networks have been developing the linkages. So this is the overall objective of the No Money for Terror. And in the conclusion, you can stress on the greater global cooperation to prevent terror financing to these terrorist organizations. So you can also write about the comprehensive convention on international terrorism. So this convention was sponsored by India in UN. So therefore, there is a need for adoption of this comprehensive convention on international terrorism. So this could address the multi-faceted problems created by terrorism, and it also envisions greater global cooperation to curb terror funding and also terror financing. So this is all for today, and from next lecture we will discuss the ethics question paper.